No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. The young man sitting at the defendant's table, perfect haircut, designer jacket, confidence leaking out of him like perfume, leaned back in his chair and laughed. Not nervously, not politely, a full, amused, careless laugh that ricocheted across the silent courtroom. Judge Frank Caprio paused mid-sentence. People turned. A bailiff shifted uncomfortably. And in that moment, the air changed. There was something unnervingly casual about the laughter, like the young man wasn't just unbothered, but comfortable, privileged, untouchable. But the real shock came when Judge Caprio's clerk whispered something into his ear, prompting the judge to raise an eyebrow, reach for a tablet, and quietly open a video. Seconds later, the entire courtroom would see something no one believed a defendant could be foolish enough to post publicly. This was the start of a case Judge Caprio would never forget. The courtroom was unusually crowded that morning. A cold Providence wind had driven people inside, wrapped in scarves and heavy coats, each waiting for their turn before the famous judge, known for fairness and humanity. The defendant, Elias Romano, age 23, was charged with excessive speeding, reckless driving, running 2 red lights, parking illegally in a handicapped zone. At first glance, it looked like the kind of case Judge Caprio handled 1,000 times a year. Except, something was off. Elias wasn't nervous. He wasn't apologetic. He wasn't even pretending to care. His smile was a little too relaxed. His slouch too entitled. His eyes darted around the courtroom with the detached amusement of someone watching a show, not participating in the consequences. People whispered among themselves. "That's him, the governor's godson. I heard he bragged about beating the tickets. He looks like he owns the place." But it wasn't just his demeanor. The tension came from something unspoken, something lingering just beneath the surface. A sense that Elias knew something the rest of the room didn't, or believed he did. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses and leaned forward slightly. At 80-something, he still carried the presence of a man who had seen the city change, families grow, and lives unravel right before him. He had seen arrogance before. He had seen fear. He had seen heartbreak, desperation, and resilience. But this strange casual laughter caught his attention. Inside, he took a quiet breath. Why is this young man laughing at a moment like this? Does he understand where he is? Does he know what this court represents? But Caprio was Caprio. His voice remained warm, steady, calm. "Good morning, Mr. Romano." Elias didn't sit up straight. Didn't look nervous. Instead, he gave a small smirk and lifted his chin. "Morning, Judge." Judge Caprio noticed the attitude instantly. Not with judgment, just with quiet awareness. He'd learned long ago. People act out of what life has taught them. Some learn humility early. Some never learn it at all. Some carry wounds behind arrogance. Some hide fear behind a laugh. He'd discover soon enough which one Elias was. Elias Romano was not a typical reckless driver. His arrest report painted a picture of a privileged upbringing, private schools, luxurious vacations, expensive hobbies, and political proximity. His godfather, Governor Samuel DeLuca, practically raised him. Eli's father had died when he was 15, and though the governor had stepped in financially and publicly, he had never been an emotional caretaker. Elias grew up surrounded by expectations, but not boundaries. Rules existed, just not for him. His family name opened doors. His connections cushioned consequences. When he messed up, someone cleaned it up quietly. On paper, Elias had everything: money, influence, education, opportunity. But beneath the designer jacket was a young man who had been drifting for years. A dropout from 2 universities, a strained relationship with his mother, a growing reputation for late-night parties, and a social media persona built around expensive cars and cocky one-liners. The courtroom saw a confident, smirking young man. But life had given him a strange mix of privilege and emptiness, a dangerous combination. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Mr. Romano, you're charged with multiple violations. Are you aware of the charges?" Elias shrugged. "Yeah. My lawyer told me." The judge nodded patiently. And your reaction is to laugh? Elias tilted his head. It's not that serious, Judge. A murmur spread across the courtroom. Judge Caprio didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke with gentle steadiness. Every case is serious to the people involved, Mr. Romano. And to this court. Elias sighed as if this were a mild inconvenience. I mean no disrespect. But it's just traffic stuff. My godfather said he stopped. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed just slightly, but his voice remained soft. He'd what, Mr. Romano? Elias swallowed. Nothing. Forget it. Caprio leaned back in his chair. He had seen that look, the look of a young man relying on someone else's shadow. But then the clerk leaned in and whispered something into Judge Caprio's ear. Something that made him blink in disbelief. The judge opened a tablet handed to him. He tapped, watched a few seconds, then pressed pause. A deep breath, a moment of quiet. Then, in his calmest voice, he said, Mr. Romano, are you aware that your Instagram account is public? Elias froze for the first time. His smirk faltered. A tiny shift but clear. Yeah, why? Judge Caprio turned the screen slightly toward him. Because last night, at 1:42 a.m., you posted a video. A rather confident video. A few people leaned forward. Elias blinked hard, confused, worried. Which video? Judge Caprio pressed play. On the screen was Elias holding his phone, sitting in the driver's seat of a sports car. The engine revved loudly. He laughed into the camera. These tickets, they mean nothing. I run this city. My godfather runs the rest. Watch me beat every single charge tomorrow easy. Gasps filled the courtroom. Elias's face went pale. The judge clicked pause again, his eyes lifting to meet the young man's. Mr. Romano, is this you? Elias swallowed. Judge, that was just a joke. My friends dared me. Caprio's eyebrows lifted with slow disappointment. A joke that disrespects the law, the court, and the people who work every day to keep this city safe? Elias's throat tightened. People in the gallery whispered sharply. Judge Caprio's voice grew quieter but heavier. Tell me, Mr. Romano, do you believe you are above the law? A long, suffocating silence followed. Elias opened his mouth, but no words came out. Something inside him cracked the unspoken truth that had followed him for years, the entitlement he didn't even realize he wore like a second skin. The entire courtroom watched him unravel, and for the first time, Elias looked small, human, lost. Judge Caprio studied him not with anger, but with deep, almost fatherly concern. Inside, Caprio thought, this young man doesn't need punishment. He needs understanding. He needs someone to hold him accountable, gently but firmly. He needs someone to see the boy beneath the arrogance. He sighed softly, preparing his next words. Judge Caprio took a long, measured breath. He had spent decades on the bench, and in that time, he had learned something profound. People rarely act out of malice. They act out of pain, fear, pride, or the blind spots life never taught them to see. As he looked at Elias Romano, who suddenly wasn't smirking, wasn't laughing, wasn't leaning back with entitlement, he saw a young man who had never been truly confronted, never been challenged, never been told no in a way that mattered. Caprio's internal voice softened. This boy thinks arrogance is strength. But arrogance is often just a cracked shield hiding a frightened child. He glanced again at the paused Instagram video. This wasn't just irresponsible. It was a window into a kid trying desperately to look invincible to an audience that rewarded bravado over honesty. But behind every exaggerated persona, Caprio knew there was usually an unspoken wound. He leaned forward and folded his hands. Mr. Romano, he said softly, I want to understand you. Not the version you project online. The real you. The young man sitting in front of me right now. Elias's jaw tightened. It was the first sign of vulnerability. Tell me, Caprio continued gently. Why would a young man feel the need to post something like this? What were you trying to prove? To whom? Elias swallowed. His voice trembled almost imperceptibly. I don't know. It's just how things are now. People expect you to be confident. Caprio tilted his head. Who expects that? My followers, Elias muttered. My friends. Everyone. And what about you? Caprio asked quietly. What do you expect from yourself? That question hit harder than anything else in the case so far. Elias blinked. His facade began to crumble like a wall losing its first bricks. I don't know, he whispered. The courtroom was silent. People looked at him differently, not as the cocky political godson, but as a young man who suddenly appeared overwhelmed by his own life. Caprio leaned back with thoughtful gravity. You seem confused, he said softly. Burdened, yet you hide it under a laugh. Elias's voice cracked. I'm not burdened. Everyone is burdened, Mr. Romano, Caprio answered gently. Burden is not weakness. Pretending not to feel it, that is where people lose their way. Elias lowered his eyes. Caprio decided it was time to go deeper. Tell me about your father, he said quietly. Elias froze. Everyone felt the shift. The judge's tone wasn't harsh or accusatory, just deeply human. Elias blinked rapidly, trying to compose himself. He died when I was 15, he said. Heart attack. Caprio nodded. And your mother? She works a lot. She's never home. She's tired all the time. She tries, but... He trailed off, struggling. But, Caprio encouraged, she doesn't know what to do with me anymore, he admitted. She thinks I don't listen. Maybe she's right. A heavy silence lingered. And the governor? Caprio asked. The reaction was instant. Elias stiffened, his shoulders rising like a boy trying to brace for impact. He helped us, Elias said. Paid for school. Gave me a car. Got me into programs. But he's not. His voice wavered. He's not my dad, Elias finished, quieter. Caprio studied him carefully, his heart softening. There it is, he thought. The boy who's been lost for years. Elias's eyes shimmered, but didn't fully break. He tells me to shape up, Elias continued. That I'm embarrassing him. That if I don't get my act together, I'm on my own. What do you want? Caprio asked. I don't know. The words burst out of him, raw and unrestrained. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Everyone expects me to be someone. I don't fit anywhere. Murmurs spread softly across the courtroom. What had started as entitlement was now unraveling into something more complicated, more human, more heartbreaking. Caprio felt it too. Mr. Romano, Caprio said slowly, do you understand why your video matters? Elias nodded miserably. I embarrassed myself. You embarrassed the court, Caprio corrected kindly. But more importantly, you embarrassed the young man you truly are. The man you could be. Elias's throat tightened. Then Caprio delivered the twist, the emotional pivot. I've watched that video several times this morning, he said. But I want the courtroom to hear something. He pressed play again, but only the audio. I run this city. My godfather runs the rest. The room felt uncomfortable. Elias's shoulders slowly collapsed inward. Caprio pressed pause. That sentence, he said, can ruin a young man's future, not because it is true, but because it reveals what he thinks is true. Elias wiped his palms on his jeans nervously. Caprio continued. You are not the governor's authority. You are not his power. You are not his reputation. You are you, and somewhere inside, I suspect you have no idea who that is. A single tear slipped from Elias's left eye. He didn't wipe it. He just stared down at the table. Caprio's expression softened even more. But we are not finished, he said. Elias looked up, confused, wary. Caprio turned back to the tablet one more time. This isn't the only clip. A hushed gasp spread across the courtroom. Elias's breath caught. He shut his eyes. Oh no, he whispered. Judge, please, not that one. Caprio looked at him with measured calm. You already know which one I mean. Caprio pressed play again, another video from the same night. This one was quieter, not public-facing. It looked like a story Elias meant to send only to a close friend. The camera was close to his face. His eyes were glossy. He spoke softly, tiredly. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I feel nothing half the time. Sometimes I just drive, because it's the only time I feel alive. But whatever. Doesn't matter. I'll always get out of it. Someone always saves me. The courtroom was stunned. This wasn't arrogance. This was pain pretending to be swagger. Elias covered his face with his hands. Judge Caprio lowered the tablet. The silence was a living thing. Finally, Caprio spoke. That is not the voice of a boy who thinks he's invincible. That is the voice of a boy who is hurting. A quiet sniffle came from the defendant's table. Elias wiped his face, embarrassed, ashamed. I didn't mean for anyone to see that, he whispered. Sometimes, Caprio said gently, we need others to see us before we can see ourselves. Elias broke. He didn't sob loudly, just a quiet, shaking release of tension he had carried for years. People in the gallery looked away, giving him dignity. But Caprio watched him not with pity, but with fatherly understanding. This young man isn't dangerous, Caprio reflected. He's lost. He's lonely. And he's been trying to feel something in all the wrong ways. He prepared to speak the most important words of the morning. Judge Caprio rested his hands on the bench and looked at Elias with a depth of compassion that only comes from a lifetime of witnessing human struggle. Inside, his thoughts were steady, deliberate. This young man isn't a criminal. He is a soul drifting without guidance, desperate for approval, terrified of insignificance. He doesn't need condemnation. He needs clarity. He needs truth spoken gently, but firmly. He breathed in. Justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes, justice is about awakening. Caprio leaned forward slightly. The courtroom waited. Even the air seemed to pause. Mr. Romano, he began softly. Life has given you extraordinary advantages. Ones many people in this room could only dream of. But blessings can become burdens when they are not understood. Elias listened, his expression raw. You believe you're supposed to be untouchable, Caprio continued, but that belief is not your own. It was handed to you by others, by people who meant well, but who never taught you the one thing every young man must learn. He paused. Strength is not the absence of consequences. Strength is the ability to face consequences and grow. Elias's eyes welled again. Caprio's voice lowered, becoming intimate, fatherly. I do not want to see you destroy your life in pursuit of an image that isn't real. The young man in that second video, the one who felt empty, who drove recklessly because he couldn't feel alive any other way. That is the young man I am speaking to now. Elias looked down, shoulders trembling. Caprio gave him a moment. Then he spoke the words that shifted the entire room's energy. I believe you are better than the boy in those videos. But believing it is not enough. You must believe it. Judge Caprio cleared his throat gently. Let's address the charges. Elias stiffened, bracing himself. You are charged with excessive speeding, reckless driving, running 2 red lights, and parking illegally in a handicapped zone. These are serious violations. Elias nodded quickly. I don't want an apology, Caprio replied. I want understanding. I do understand, Elias insisted softly. I was being stupid. I wasn't thinking. I didn't care what happened to me. That admission rippled across the courtroom. Caprio's face softened with a kind of sorrow. That, he said, is exactly why this case is different. He folded his hands. I do not see arrogance in front of me. I see a young man who has never been taught to value himself in the right ways. Elias looked up, surprised, vulnerable. Caprio continued, driving recklessly is not just a legal violation. It is a cry for control in a life where you feel you have none. Running red lights is not rebellion, it is a boy trying to feel visible in a world where he feels overlooked. Elias swallowed hard. And parking in a handicapped spot, Caprio added, is the act of someone trying to prove power to people who never needed you to prove anything. Elias looked down again, ashamed. The judge's tone eased. I'm not angry with you, Mr. Romano. I am concerned for you. Caprio asked quietly. Mr. Romano, what do you want from your life? Not what others expect what you want. Elias hesitated, then whispered, I want to feel proud of myself, just once. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the bailiff looked shaken. Judge Caprio nodded slowly, deeply. That, he said, is a beautiful place to start. He paused, a long, meaningful pause that felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Caprio looked at him with compassionate firmness. Mr. Romano, I'm not going to punish you today. Gasps burst across the gallery. Elias stared, stunned. Caprio raised a gentle hand to settle the room. This young man does not need punishment. He needs direction. He needs accountability. He needs to understand that his life has value not because of who his godfather is, but because of who he is. He turned to Elias. For that reason, I am dismissing the fines. Elias's jaw dropped. But, Caprio added immediately, this is not mercy. This is responsibility. Elias straightened, listening intensely. You will complete 30 hours of community service not for the court, not for the public image, but for yourself. You will serve people who cannot repay you. You will help those who struggle daily. You will see life through their eyes. Elias nodded vigorously, tears slipping freely. Yes, Judge, I will, I promise. Caprio continued. And you will write a thoughtful reflection not for social media, not for attention, but for your own clarity. You will tell me what you learned, what you felt, and what you want to change. Elias nodded, emotional beyond words. And Mr. Romano, Caprio added, his tone almost tender, I want you to speak to your mother, not as a frustrated son, not as someone who feels lost, but as a young man trying to rebuild. She deserves that. And so do you. Elias covered his face, overwhelmed. Caprio gave him a moment to breathe. When Elias finally lowered his hands, his eyes were red, his voice fragile. Judge Caprio, thank you, I mean it. No one ever talked to me like that. Caprio nodded with a quiet smile. That is because no one ever listened to you the way you needed, he said. You are not a bad young man. You are a young man who needs guidance and the courage to face yourself honestly. Elias nodded again, a new steadiness forming in his expression. Something humble, something real. Caprio closed his folder. This court is adjourned. The gavel sounded softly. Elias stood slowly, almost reverently. He looked at Judge Caprio with gratitude so raw it almost hurt to witness. As he stepped back, the courtroom murmured, not with judgment, but with empathy. Some people wiped away tears. Others nodded as if witnessing a life turning quietly onto a new path. Even the bailiff smiled gently at him. Caprio watched the young man walk out not with swagger, not with arrogance, but with the weight of responsibility and the spark of hope. He murmured under his breath, too soft for anyone to hear. Sometimes the hardest cases are not about guilt, but about guiding a soul home. Sometimes justice is not loud. Sometimes it doesn't come with punishment, anger, or fear. Sometimes justice looks like a conversation, one that reaches into a person's heart and lights a path they never knew was there. Elias Romano walked into the courtroom as a boy who laughed at consequences. He walked out as a young man taking his first step toward becoming someone he could finally respect. And that, Judge Caprio believed, was the true purpose of the bench. Not punishment, but transformation, not condemnation, but understanding, and not fear, but hope.